I just finished setting up Elasticsearch to monitor some WordPress servers. I want to use this video to do a demonstration and share my code base. The challenge I have is that I have several different clients and they all own various Linux servers. Each Linux server will have multiple WordPress websites on them. The Apache HTTP service on any server will use virtual host records to decide which WordPress website to serve. As someone who has to maintain these websites, I find it too time consuming to log into each individual WordPress website and each individual server just to figure out which WordPress plugins are out of date, what new WordPress plugins have been installed, any brute force SSH login activities, what the system resource usage is like, and other security details. To solve this problem, I set up the basics of a security information and event management platform using Elasticsearch, Kibana, Logstash, the Beats library, Clam antivirus, and fail2ban. Now I can just go to Kibana to review the performance and activities of all the different services across all the different servers. Here are some screenshots from the demonstration that I am about to show you. This dashboard is showing an example of MySQL performance across all the different servers. And I can use this query field to drill down on any specific server. And this one is showing website traffic and web activity. And this one here is showing the details of out-of-date WordPress plugins and the results of antivirus scans. And there are hundreds of other dashboards and widgets that you can pick from to assemble your own custom dashboard. I also configured this Elasticstack platform to email me alerts about specific server activities and WordPress activities. I have made my solution open source in case anyone finds it useful. I have put a link to my GitHub project in this documentation here and also in the video link description. It only takes 5 minutes to set everything up, but I am going to take a full hour to do a demonstration and explain some of the installation instructions. I won't be able to go over every single detail in this video, so I plan to create a series of videos that explain line by line how I created this project. If there is anything unclear in this video, just leave a question in the comments or email me, and I will try to answer them in the series of videos that I am about to produce. Please note that this project is considered a beta, so test it out yourself first before using it in a production setting. There are additional steps that you should follow to secure the platform, which I will try to address in upcoming videos. And as usual, if you find this video helpful, then please give a like, subscribe, and share with your colleagues. Okay, let's get started. Let's start by setting up 2 Linux servers and install some WordPress sites to each of them. Then we will set up the Elk server, and then we will configure our Linux servers to transmit observability data and security data to our Elk stack. I have already written all the steps out on this web page here. You can find the link to this page in the video description. Although this page seems lengthy, there's only a few steps we need to follow, which I hope this video demonstration will clarify. So to start, let me show you the 3 virtual machines I have spinned up. I've got SSH windows opened up. Let me find them. This first machine will be our Elk stack. It has 8 GB of memory and Ubuntu 22.04 on it. And here's the public IP address. This second machine will be used for our first 3 WordPress websites. It has 2 GB of memory and I have a brand new instance of Ubuntu 22.04 on it. You can see the server's public IP address here. This third machine will be used for our last 3 WordPress websites. It also has 2 GB of memory and Ubuntu 22.04, and here's the public IP address. And here is a screenshot of my DNS settings. I pointed web1.evermite.net, web2.evermite.net, and web3.evermite.net to the first WordPress server. And I pointed web4, web5, and web6 to my second WordPress server. So let's put some WordPress websites on each of these Ubuntu servers. All the code we need for this video will be found in this GitHub project here. And in this folder, I have a bash script that will install some WordPress websites to an Ubuntu server. So I'm just going to copy the code and paste it into a shell script on this first server over here. And I'll press paste. And the first thing we're going to need is the IP address for this server, which is this one over here. And then I'm going to paste it to the variable IP server. This is because Apache might need to know the IP address to properly locate the appropriate virtual host record for each website. So now let's make this script executable, and then we will run it to install 3 WordPress sites on the server. And now I'm just going to copy this code and repeat the same thing on the second server. So I'll just paste it in here. And then let's get the IP address, which is this one over here. I'll paste it into the variable. And I'm also going to have to replace all instances of Web 1 with Web 4. And let's replace all instances of Web 2 with Web 5. And Web 3 with Web 6. Okay, let's make this executable. And let's run it. Okay, it looks like the first server is already done. And now the second server is also done. So I have all 6 websites opened up in this browser window. And let's complete the integration. We'll start by putting in the database credentials into each of these. And you can find the database name, username, and password in this script over here. You can see here, for example, Web 1 was using these credentials, and this is Web 2. So I'll just go ahead and submit them all. Submit, 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 and submit. And now we just need to configure an administrator for each website. Here are the credentials for Web 1. Okay, looks like Web 1 is up. And we'll just repeat for the remaining websites. All right, so we've just completed setting up all 6 WordPress websites. Let's set up the Elastic Stack. We just completed this step, so it's this step here. For this step, there are many different ways to set up Elasticsearch and Kibana. In the past, we have made several videos for each of those ways, and any of those ways can work with this video. On this webpage, I've given 2 different references as 2 different examples of how to install Elasticsearch and Kibana. For this video, we will use a simplified version of this second option, meaning we will use Docker to set up Elasticsearch because it's fast and it's good enough for our demonstration. So let's scroll down and grab the code to install Docker, Docker Compose, Git, curl, and Vim. And I'll go to the Elasticsearch server that has the 8 gigabytes of memory, and I'll just install all these things. It might take a while. Okay, everything's installed now. So the next thing we need is the actual GitHub project because it actually has a whole lot of tools here that we can use. So I'll just get the link. And then I'll do a git clone of this repository and go into the Elk WordPress SIEM directory. And in here you see a bunch of tools. I want to go into the ES directory because this will actually have our Docker project. And in here, there's a sample environment file we can use to spin up Elasticsearch with Docker Compose. All we have to do is make a copy of this sample file as a .env file. And let me show you what is in this .env file. I will go into more detail about these environment variables in later videos. For now, just remember that the password for the Elastic user is change_me. We will use this to log in later. So now I just do docker compose up --build -d. Okay, it looks like things are up. And if I do a docker ps-a, okay, my monitor is too small. Let me just format this with fewer columns. And maybe I should also add the port number. So let me just format this one more time. Okay, I see 5601 for Kibana. So I'll also need the IP address. So I'll type this IP address followed by the port number into my web browser. Okay, it looks like the TLS certificate for Kibana is up and running. Accept the risk. And there we go. We see Kibana is up and running. So let's log in with Elastic change_me. And it looks like everything is working. Now, one of the things that's hard for me to do is remember IP addresses. So I am going to update the host file of this Windows computer to point the hostname Kibana over to this IP address. So let me open up Notepad as an administrator. And let's look for the Windows host file. Here it is. And I'll paste the IP address for the Elastic server and reference it with ES01 and Kibana. Save. And now let me go to my web browser and type Kibana:5601. Okay, this is good. TLS certificate is working. Accept the risk and continue. And now I should be able to log in again with Elastic. The password is change_me. Okay, this looks like it's all working. At this point, we have our WordPress websites up and running, and we have Elasticsearch and Kibana up and running. We can now focus on connecting everything. When connecting all these pieces programmatically, I prefer not to use the Elastic superuser to do all this. Instead, we will create a separate user, which I will call the agent user. We will give the credentials of this agent user to these Linux machines and their client applications so that they can connect to Elasticsearch with it. If the agent user is compromised, we can revoke its access without affecting the access of the original Elastic user. I will give the agent user the super user role, but in a production setting, I will leave it to you to limit the permissions appropriately. Let's return to our documentation and scroll to the next step, which is actually here. I have some bash setup scripts in this directory that will programmatically set up the agent user. This directory also has bash scripts that we will use later in this video to set up other useful resources. So let's return to our Elasticsearch server and prepare these scripts for usage. And to prepare them, all we need to do is make a copy of the environment sample file as the .env file. When we look at the .env file, I want to bring your attention to the fact that the bash setup scripts in this directory will try to connect to the host ES01 and to the host Kibana. The ES01 and Kibana host names are known only within the Docker networks and are not publicly accessible because I did not create any public DNS records for them. This is also why a few minutes ago, I had to update the host file on my Windows machine in order to tell my Windows machine that typing https://kibana:5601 should take me to the IP address of this Elasticsearch server. Additionally, the TLS certificates for Elasticsearch and Kibana were signed against the common name of ES01 and Kibana, respectively. For any client applications like curl, PHP, Metricbeat, and whatever else, for these client applications to verify the TLS certificates, they need to connect to Elasticsearch and Kibana on the common names of ES01 and Kibana, respectively. So let's update the host file on this server to tell this server that the host names ES01 and Kibana references itself. I'm going to type 127.0.0.1 instead of a public IP address so that the traffic does not need to leave this local machine. With that done, I should mention one more point. You can use these bash setup scripts against an entirely different instance of Elasticsearch and Kibana. Just populate the Elastic and Kibana variables with the correct destination and credentials. So now we're ready to set up the agent user. I'll use this username and password. And all we do is just write setup step 1.4. And that should be it. I should be able to go to Kibana now and click on the menu, go to Stack Management, click on Users, and you can see this new user here, My Agent. Now, for this super user role here, just remember to reduce the privileges in a production environment. We're ready to move on to the next step, which is to connect each Linux server to our Elastic Stack. In order for these Linux servers to find the Elastic Stack on the host names of ES01 and Kibana, again, we also need to update their host files. So let's go back to our Elasticsearch server, and I'm gonna grab the IP address of this Elastic server again. And now let's jump over to one of our Linux servers, and I'll open the host file and add it here, ES01 Kibana. And I'll save, and let's go to the other server, open up the host file, add the address here, and type in ES01 Kibana, save. Now these Linux servers know how to find our Elastic Stack. The first thing we will do is install Metricbeat, Filebeat, Auditbeat, and Packetbeat to these WordPress Linux servers. These 4 beats from the beats library will ship useful operational and security data to our Elasticsearch, which we can build our security information and event management processes around. These beats need to connect via HTTPS to the hosts ES1 and Kibana. As mentioned, we are using TLS certificates that are signed by our own certificate authority. The certificate of the certificate authority is found within the Docker container of our Elasticsearch service on our Elasticsearch server. In order for the beats to verify the TLS certificates, they need a copy of the CA certificate. If you are using publicly signed certificates like Let's Encrypt, Sectago, Semantic, and countless others, then you can skip the next step since your operating system probably already has a copy of the public CA certificate. If you don't understand what all this means, don't worry. We are in the middle of creating a series on encryption and TLS certificates. So let's return to our documentation and get the steps for downloading our CA certificate. So let's make a directory on each of our Linux servers to house our CA certificate. I'll make it at etc certs es. And then we're going to grab the CA cert from this directory within the Elasticsearch container. But the Elasticsearch container name could change from system to system. So let me just do a docker ps here. Okay, so our Elasticsearch container name is this up_es01_1. So I'll just docker cp the container name, and I'll paste the path. I have an extra colon. Let me just delete the colon. All right, so now our CA cert is in our host machine's temp directory, and I'll print it with cat. And now I'll just copy this CA certificate and paste it as a new file within the ES directory as a ca.cert file. And I'll do that for the other server as well. And once this is done, our beats, when they connect to Elasticsearch, they'd be able to verify the TLS certificates. So all we have to do now is just install each of the 4 beats. And the instructions are simply this. I'll just copy it. Maybe I'll just paste it into a shell script because then it's just easier to run all in one shot. Paste. And I'll copy this and put on the other server as well. But let me just chmod executable and run this. And just paste the instructions in this file here as well on the second server. And just run this to install the beats. All right, so this might take a moment. Okay, it looks like everything is installed. To use these beats, we need to update the configuration files of each beat with connection details. To save time, I made copies of these configuration files, which you can use. These beat configuration files are found in the beats directory of our GitHub project. So I will go back to the terminal window of our Elasticsearch server and navigate to the beats directory of our GitHub project. And now I'll just secure copy all these files over to both servers. Okay, so now the beats have all the configuration files. Next, we need to configure Elasticsearch by running some setup commands for each beat. We only need to run these setup commands once from one of our servers. We have to remember to not rerun these setup commands from any other server unless you intentionally want to overwrite some settings. So I'll just copy these setup commands and paste it into a bash script on one of the Linux servers that have the beats installed. So I'll just paste it here. And let's just make this file executable. All right, and let's run this setup script. And it might take a moment, so I'll pause until this is done. Okay, it looks like the beats library has properly configured Elasticsearch. So let's return to the documentation because my bash setup scripts also have some useful tools that we can use later on. So let's go to the Elasticsearch server in the ES scripts directory, and let's run setup step 2.x, and this might take a few seconds to run. Okay, it looks like things are done. So let's go to Kibana, and let's click on rules. And these rules are extra tools that came with our setup step 2.x. And if we go to index management, these indices are extra resources that came with our setup step 2.x. And these dashboards, these were set up by the beats setup command in step 2.6. So we're ready to move on to the next step, which is basically to just start up all the beats. And I'll go to the first Linux WordPress server, not this one, this terminal. Okay, and I'll just make a bash script so I can run this all at once. Okay, systemctl enable and systemctl start. And let's go ahead and copy this because we're going to need it on the second Linux server as well. I'll just run this file now. Okay, and on to the second server. Oh, I just remembered. Before we can start up the beat, we should actually go to Metricbeat and go into the modules directory. And if I want my SQL performance to be streamed to Elasticsearch, I need to update these MySQL database credentials. I'm going to replace Web 1 with Web 4, Web 2 with Web 5, and Web 3 with Web 6, because these are the actual credentials for this server. And there we go. Okay, now we're ready to start all the beats on this server as well. I will also make a shell script here, just paste in what I have from the first server, and let's just execute this and run it. Okay, all the beats should be running now. They should be sending information to Elasticsearch already, but I want to come to some of these websites and hit refresh a few times because I want Apache to send some new logs to Elasticsearch, and I want some of the latest MySQL performance data in Elasticsearch as well. Okay, now let's go to dashboards, and I'm going to look for Apache related dashboards first. So let's open up these two. So for the Filebeat Apache dashboards, you can see interesting metrics already based on some of the page reloads we did. Let's limit our results to just the second WP2 server. Okay, this looks good. Let's take a look at WP1 only. So just the first server. This looks good as well. And you can see the Apache performance data here as well. So let's look at MySQL related dashboards next. I'll just open up these two. Okay, nothing yet for Filebeat, maybe because there aren't any interesting MySQL logs yet. But for the MySQL performance, you can already see some interesting graphs here. So next, let's take a look at some system-related dashboards. And there are just so many that most of them are self-explanatory. I'm pretty sure if you explore them on your own, it would make sense. But I'll just pick a couple of them. And let's say this one as well. For example, this dashboard tells you some uptime about your servers. And this one shows you some of your system resource usage. So there are a lot, and you can even pluck out some of these widgets and create your own dashboards later on. At this point, all your beats have been set up, and you already have a lot in your Elastic stack in terms of observing and monitoring your servers. Everything we've done up to this point have not been specific to WordPress, so you could choose to stop here if you wanted to. But if you want some WordPress specific integration, that's what this next step will be about. One feature I want is for Elasticsearch to notify me about any out-of-date plugins on any of my WordPress websites. I created a very simple WordPress plugin that will scan a WordPress website and send outdated plugin information to Elasticsearch. This plugin can be found in our GitHub project under the directory WordPress WP Content Plugins. So let's go over there. So I'm on the Elasticsearch server, go up 2 directories, go to WordPress WP Content, and here's the plugins directory. So Evermite is the plugin that we want. It's also a directory, and I'll just SCP it over to both servers. All right, the plugin files should be on both servers. Let's go to the first Linux server and prepare to copy this plugin into each of the 3 different WordPress websites on this server. To make it easier to copy, I'll just move the plugin into this temporary directory I made, and then I'll CP it from plugins over to the Web1 WP Content Plugins directory, and then CP it to number 2 and CP it to number 3. And remember to change the ownership on these directories because my plugin needs to be able to write to the directory that it's in. And then we will repeat the same commands on the second Linux server. I'll just move this Evermite plugin into this temporary plugins directory to make the CP command a little bit easier to use. Again, now it's Web 4. And then repeat for Web 5 and Web 6. And remember to change the ownership so that my plugin can write to its own directory. Okay, now let's go to each of these websites and log in. Okay, and let's activate each of these plugins. All right, all the plugins should be activated now. To tell our new plugin to send information to Elasticsearch about any outdated plugins, we just need to visit a specific URL for each website. Visiting this URL will cause a PHP script to scan the WordPress site and then make an HTTPS curl request to Elasticsearch. This URL will only send information to Elasticsearch once every 12 hours, no matter how many times you load the web page. You can change this throttling behavior inside the plugin's constants, which I will show you in later episodes. So let's go toggle some of these URLs so that Elasticsearch gets the first payload of plugin details from WordPress. Okay, so all 6 plugins should have sent information to our Elasticsearch server. And if we go to our dashboards here, there should be a dashboard called WordPress server. This was set up by our setup step 2.x script that we ran earlier. And this is good. Our WordPress plugins told Elasticsearch that there are 6 websites and none of them have out-of-date plugins. And this dashboard widget is powered by a data view, and that data view is powered by an index called WP plugins. So we can double check that things are working by going to index management, and you can see 6 records in the index called WP plugins. And also we can do a search over here as well, WP plugin search, also 6 records. So everything seems to be working so far. So I'm going to pause the video and upload some out-of-date plugins to web5.evermite.net and web6.evermite.net because I just want to be sure that I can send out-of-date plugin information to Elasticsearch. Okay, I found some old plugins from other WordPress websites and I've put them into Web 5 and Web 6. And what I've also done is on the terminal window of the second server, I deleted these .lastping files from Web 5 and Web 6 because that will help me bypass that 12-hour throttle that we have in place. This .lastping file just keeps a timestamp of the last time these plugins sent information to Elasticsearch. Every time we visit the plugin URL, this .lastping file will be remade with a new timestamp. So let's go to the plugin URLs of Web 5 and Web 6 and just ping them again. And now in Elasticsearch, we should have some new records in the WP plugins index. Let's just press search. Great, it went from 6 to 8. And at the bottom of this result, we can see the out-of-date plugins for Web 5 and Web 6. And if we go to the dashboard and hit refresh, we can also see the out-of-date plugin information here in the first 2 rows. Okay, so let's go back to the documentation and see what the next step is. So in this step 2.9, it is to set up Heartbeat to monitor the uptime of your websites. The Heartbeat service is one of the Docker service in your Elasticsearch. So right out of the box, I've already done this step for you, and Heartbeat is monitoring the 6 websites that we've set up in this video. In a moment, I will show you how to configure Heartbeat to monitor other websites. But let's head over to Kibana first. You can see that we are monitoring 12 different URLs. We are monitoring 6 base URLs of our 6 websites, and we are also monitoring these 6 plugin URLs. These URLs are being pinged every minute. And I should mention that even though we are pinging our plugin URLs every minute, again, remember they're throttled to send information to Elasticsearch only once every 12 hours. So if we go back to our Elasticsearch server and go to the base of our project directory and go into the Beats Heartbeat directory, there's a monitors.d directory. And in here, these are the files that you can edit to decide which URLs you want to monitor. You can even specify the ping schedules in these as well. Okay, so this step for Heartbeat is already done. Let's move on to the next step. In this next step, I want to install Clam antivirus on each Linux server. Every time Clam scans our server for viruses and malware, I also want Clam to send a log of the results to Elasticsearch. Later on, Elastic will send me a notification via email if there were any infected files. So let's just do the apt-get update and install Clam AV on both Linux servers. So I'll do this on the second server first, and let's put it on the first server as well. Okay, now once things are done, I'm just going to make another directory here called Clam scans because it's going to house some useful bash scripts that we have from our GitHub project. So I'll do this on the first server as well. And now I'll go back to our Elasticsearch server, go to our GitHub project in the Clam scans directory, and I'm going to SCP these useful scripts over to both Linux servers. Okay, now that we've got these scripts, let's enable these bash scripts by making a copy of the environment file. And you can see this environment file is just a connection to our Elastic instance. And now we can scan for viruses using the scan.sh file. We will pass in the -d argument, which is the directory we want to scan. The scan.sh file is just a wrapper to the clam scans command. And now let's repeat these steps for the other server. And now we can run the scan file, just so we have a log that we can send over to Elastic in a moment. So let's take a look at our other server. Okay, it looks like the scan is still happening. Oh, just finished. No infected files. A copy of this log is placed in the log/scan.log file. And we can send this log over to Elasticsearch using this send.sh bash script that I have. And on our second server, the scan is still happening. Okay, done. So we can send this along to Elasticsearch as well. Okay, so let's go over to our Kibana. And I will go to Dashboards, WordPress servers. And in this widget, you can see a summary of our scan.log. If you want more details, you can just go to DevTools over here, and you can search the Clam scans index for a full report of the log that was sent over. So you can see 2 results here, and these are the 2 log files that we received. At this point, I will leave it to you to set up a cron tab to periodically scan your servers for viruses and to use my send.sh file to send Clam scan logs to Elasticsearch. So let's see what the next step is. I'm going to skip fail to ban. I'll talk about that in later episodes. And we've already done step 3. We were setting up multiple servers at the same time. We have done step 4. I already demonstrated some of the dashboards to you. So we're on to the final step now. In this final step, we want to enable Kibana rules and email ourselves alerts. For our purposes, rules are basically search queries that Kibana schedules to run periodically. If these search queries return any results from indices, then Kibana will create an alert for you to review while you are logged into Kibana. You can also attach actions to alerts. An action could be something like send the alert to another index, or send the alert to an email, or send the alert to your Jira project management system, or send the alert to your Slack group, or send the alert to your Discord server. Anyway, the list of actions that you can perform is quite exhaustive, so I won't go into all of them. For our purposes, we'll just send the alert to our email. So if I go back to Kibana, go to Stack Management, and go to Rules, you will see that I've imported some rules for you already. These rules were created as part of our setup step 2.x bash script that we ran earlier. These rules might be a good start for your security information and event management processes. You can certainly refine these rules further, and you can add more rules or you can delete some of these. Also, take notice of the column called interval. This column shows you how frequently Kibana will run these rules. In later episodes, I will explain how to create and manage these rules. For now, let's enable all of them so that Kibana can start using them. Let's enable the Clam AV scan rule. This means that anytime a Clam log shows there's 1 or more infected files, we will get an email alert. And next, let's enable disk usage warning so that if our disk usage is above a certain threshold, we'll get an email alert. And I just realized we need to modify this query a bit. I need to update the file system or the disk name that we want to monitor, which is dev SDA. I'll just copy that and paste it in here. And let's lower the threshold to 10% so that we get an email alert if the disk is used up 10% or more. These 3 rules are already enabled. So we will get an email alert if the host file has changed or if there has been a successful SSH login immediately after 10 or more failed consecutive login attempts, or if the sudoers file has changed. And next, let's email ourselves an alert if any of the WordPress sites are down. Let's get an email if WordPress plugins are out of date. And let's get an email if any files in the WordPress plugins directory has changed. And now let's try to trigger some of these rules. For the Clam antivirus scan, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to edit this scan.log and change the infected files to 1. And I'll just send this log over. And I don't want to wait half an hour for this rule to fire, so I will just run the rule right now. And for disk usage, I don't want to wait an hour, I'll just run it right now. For the host file, let me actually just edit the host file on this Linux server. I'll just add something like this. And now I'll just run this rule as well. And next, let me try to trigger the failed SSH login attempts. I have 2 PuTTY windows here, and I already tried to log in multiple times. I failed more than 10 times, and finally I have 1 successful one. So this rule runs every 5 minutes, so it will trigger soon. For the uptime rule, I'm just going to maybe turn off Apache on one of the servers. So on this server, I'll just do systemctl stop Apache 2, and that should bring down some of our websites. To trigger this last rule, WordPress plugins changed, I'll just install a plugin on one of these websites. So I'll click on add new plugin, and I'll pick any plugin. It doesn't really matter because any of these plugins will put files in the plugins directory, which Auditbeat is going to monitor. All right, so that should be good. And we already have outdated plugins on some of our WordPress websites. So let's just run both of these rules. Okay, I waited a minute and now I can see alerts for the antivirus rule. I can see alerts for the disk usage. Okay, no alerts yet for host files, but let me maybe wait a few seconds. Okay, alerts are showing up now. I can see alerts for failed SSH attempts. Alerts for website outages. Alerts for outdated plugins. And alerts for changed plugins. The final thing we want to do is email ourselves the alerts as they occur. In the Docker Compose file of our Elasticsearch server, I have already initialized a Logstash service for you. Logstash can ingest alerts from Elasticsearch and periodically email them to us. If I go back to my Elasticsearch server and go to the logstash/logstash directory, I have a pipelines.yaml file. This pipelines.yaml file tells Logstash to run the pipelines specified by some .conf files. I will explain how I create the .conf files in later episodes, but for now, just know that these .conf files tell Logstash to ingest alerts in Elasticsearch and email them to us. But for now, all we have to do is update the SMTP details in the environment file used by Docker Compose to enable the email service. So I'll just do SMTP out enabled, and let's just grab the SMTP user and password. I'm going to use Mailtrap as my SMTP service. So I'll just grab this username and I'll plug it in here, and I'll take this password and plug it in here. I have a variable here called Logstash debug schedule that I use just for testing and debugging. The situation is that normally I have a different schedule already declared in each of the .conf files mentioned in my pipelines.yaml file. Some might run only at midnight, some might run every 10 minutes, some might run every few hours, and so on and so on. When testing, I don't want to wait too long for the pipelines to run, so I use this Logstash debug schedule variable to override the normal schedule and tell each of the configuration pipelines to run every minute instead. So to clarify what I mean, let me just go back to the Logstash directory and look at some of the conf.d files. So I go over here. If I look at the clam scans.conf, you can see this is going to run every 15 minutes. And if I look at the WP outdated plugins, this runs every midnight. Normally, I would declare a schedule like this in my .conf file. What this means is if the variable logstash debug schedule has a value, then we use it. If the logstash debug schedule does not have a value, then we use the default. And the default is whatever is on the right side of this colon. So in this case, the default is to run every midnight. And this actually works fine for me when I run Logstash natively without using Docker. But for whatever reason, this approach is not working for me when I'm using this particular Docker project. So I'm going to cheat. I have a temporary band-aid solution. So here you can see I have a shell script. And all this shell script will do is replace all the schedules with my Logstash debug schedule. So let me just run this. And now if I open any of the configuration files, you can see that the schedule uses my new variable. And maybe I'll just show one more to confirm. Okay, and there we go. And later we can just use git reset to revert things back to the master branch. Now let me go back to the directory with the docker compose file and just restart Docker with the new environment variables. Okay, it looks like everything is up, and let's just figure out the container names. So let's take a look at the logs for the WP logstash 01. And good, we see a lot of output. I do see some errors here at the bottom, but that's only because I'm using the free version of my Mailtrap, so there's some throttling going on. Great, we're seeing emails coming into Mailtrap already, websites that are down, host files modified, virus scan results, outdated plugins, and new plugins that were installed. Let me wait a minute. Okay, more emails came through. Okay, we saw these already. Oh, here's our brute force SSH email alert. Yeah, this looks right. And I think we saw these two emails already. And that's pretty much all there is for now. Give me a bit of time to produce a series of videos that goes line by line on how I created this whole project. That way you can take the code base and reverse engineer it for your own purposes. So if you found this video helpful, then give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more videos.